Welcome to the Programming Lions podcast. Have you ever wanted to know more about critical race theory? Well, today is your lucky day. We have an expert on the show. Dr. George Maurer has joined us. And not only is he an expert on CRT, but he is retired Air Force and he spent 35 years in broadcast journalism and has a number of awards and accolades to his name. But today, we're going to focus primarily on CRT, critical race theory. What is it? How does it get taught? How do you notice it? Where do you see it? What can parents and kids do about it if it shows up at their school? So let's unpack it and get into it. George, welcome to the Programming Lions podcast. We are excited to have you on and tap into your expertise today. But before we do that, could you give us a quick rundown on your background?
Well, I've been in military journalism for 35 years, and I've covered some pretty big stories at the top of the Pentagon, Guantanamo Bay prisoners, the first enemy combatant trials, covered Super Bowl 42, a couple of Major League All-Star games, been stationed all around the world, deployed to Iraq. I've been around, that's for sure.
Okay,
That's for
sounds
sure.
like it. Wow, very cool. So you covered the Super Bowl. I think I saw you covered the Super Bowl when it was in Phoenix, which is where we live.
That's exactly right. Yep.
That's cool.
And that was as a New York Giants fan, I didn't know the Giants were going to the Super Bowl when I essentially assigned myself to go to that
Mm-hmm.
particular thing. I just wanted to make sure that it was being done right.
Are you the broadcaster on it?
Yes, or have 35 years of experience as a military broadcaster. Yes.
All right. So on the Super Bowl or any other game, do you have to know every single player? So then if like they have a good play or
No, not necessarily, because it wasn't my job to call the game. So I wasn't the guy who said Eli Manning drops back, throws a helmet catch to the wide receiver. I didn't have to say any of those things. I went and I gathered what's called shout outs to the troops. The Super Bowl is like a huge event, so like everybody's there.
Mm.
So there was football players from years ago from all different teams. Hollywood famous people were all there. And so we just walked around and gathered what we call shout outs.
Mm.
And so I would say to them, hey, I give you an opportunity to say thank you for the troops in Iraq and Afghanistan on the front lines. What would you like to say to them? And then they would say it. And then at night, I would edit them together and I would send them back to our broadcast center. And then troop shout outs aired during the game while the military audience was listening or watching the game. They had their troop shout outs during commercial breaks.
Oh,
wow,
wow.
that's pretty cool.
That is really cool. I bet you it's a pretty rewarding job to have, too.
I
Yeah,
would call that one of the highlights of my career, no
Yeah.
doubt about it. Also, as a Giants fan, watching old dopey Eli Manning, at that time, that's how people looked at him, defeat the unstoppable Tom Brady, 18 and
Yeah.
0 Patriots. The Giants were running up and down the tunnels saying, 18 and 1, can't get it done, ah, ha, ha, and that kind of thing. If you go later to my Facebook account, I actually have the story that I made. One of the things that I did beyond the shout outs was I created a story for a wounded warrior, Lieutenant Colonel Greg Gadsden, who lost his legs overseas in a combat. And he was friends with the defensive coordinator of the New York Giants. And so he came and he gave them a bunch of inspirational speeches during that season. And he became a honorary member of the team.
Mm.
And the point of my
Very
story was
cool.
to ask the team owner, hey, everybody says this guy's a member of the team. Will he get a Super Bowl ring along with everyone else?
Ooh.
And the owner said, not to ruin it, but the owner said, that is an unbelievably cool idea. I'll talk to the
Mm.
other owner. And in the end, yes, Lieutenant Colonel Greg Gadsden got a Super Bowl ring.
That is awesome.
And I don't know if I'm the only one who asked that question that week, but I'm certainly one of them. And I like to think that I played some small role. The whole thing was just definitely one of the highlights of my career, for
Yeah.
sure.
That's a really cool story, and kudos to you for thinking of that. Like, not everybody would think about those kinds of details to get that wounded warrior such kind of recognition, and what a great memory for him to have. So obviously you have a doctorate in education, and we're going to get into CRT in a bit, but we've got a couple of other questions that kind of lighten it up before we get into the more serious stuff.
All right, so this is kind of just like a kind of fun question. Would you rather be in an Uber stuck in traffic with Ibram X. Kendi or Kamala Harris?
Yeah. Of those two, I think I would probably prefer to be in a Uber stuck in traffic with Ibram X. Kendi as a anti-racist, as he likes to call himself. So we could, if nothing else, have a very engaging conversation while we are waiting for the traffic to clear up.
All right, all right.
Nice. I've heard that you, and also me and Max are the same thing, are a pizza connoisseur.
Mm.
What's the most unusual thing you've eaten on a pizza?
Oh boy. Well, I'm a traditionalist when it comes to pizza. Growing up on the Jersey Shore, I believe that the best pizza is just a plain cheese pizza, and when it's done well, it's hard to beat. I'm not real big on toppings, but I will say this. The most unusual toppings I've ever seen on a pizza were when I lived in Japan. They put anything that crawls on pizza over
Oh
there,
my gosh.
including mayonnaise. They put mayonnaise
They put
all
mayonnaise
over
on
that thing.
pizza?
And mayonnaise is definitely my kryptonite. I don't eat too many unusual things. However, I have had a few Hawaiian pizzas in my time when I was outside of the New Jersey area when it was kind of tough to find a good, solid, basic cheese pizza.
Speaking of Hawaiian pizzas, what do you think of pineapple on pizza?
The New Jersey guy in me immediately cowers and says, what a horrible thing to do to a perfectly lovely piece of food. But I have to admit, I actually did acquire a bit of a taste for it. I think it was the frozen DiGiorno Hawaiian pizzas that I kind of got into the habit of eating when we lived out in the Portuguese Azores, out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, where there was not a good pizza within 1,000 miles.
What makes a great pizza? A good pizza?
The number one thing that makes a great pizza is the crust. If you go to anywhere, any pizzeria that has pre-made crust, leave immediately. You got to get the guy who throws it up in the air, twists it and turns it and lays it all out. And then they've got to put the right amount of sauce on, not too much, not too little. And then, of course, you got to have the right kind of mozzarella cheese, the kind of mozzarella cheese that almost tastes like butter when you're eating it. So those are the things that I look for in a good pizza.
Okay. Well, would you
Nice.
boys agree? Is crust the number one item?
Crust is very good. I like the doughy crust.
We've uncovered and I think really dug into some of life's great mysteries here with pizza.
I love talking about pizza. No problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, pizza's great.
All right, so I've heard that you travel in an RV, right?
You do.
So what is it like to travel in an RV?
Well, it's actually very convenient. I have what's called an A class shorty. It's nice because you get to take how you get comfortable in your own bedroom and in your own bed. And
Yep.
like if you go away for a week or two and you come home, you're just like, my bed. Well, the thing about an RV is you get to take your bed with you and you get to go all over the place. You can go pretty much anywhere a road will let you drive it. And so I live in California, and there's a Camp Pendleton is a Marine Corps base not too far away. They have RV camps for about $80, $90 a night, and it's right on the beach.
Wow.
So sometimes we'll just go down there for a weekend just to go hang out at the beach, and we'll stay there overnight. It's great.
That sounds pretty fun.
Yeah.
I highly recommend it. Rent it. Definitely rent one before buying. So that way, at least you know what you're getting into. You have kitchen facilities. You don't have to eat out at restaurants every night, which gets very expensive when you got a
Yes.
big family, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Nice. Well, sadly now all the fun topics are gone. Let's go
Okay.
into the more serious ones now. What is critical race theory?
Critical race theory, it's complicated, but it's really not. Critical race theory is a divisive educational tool where they divide kids and adults into two different groups based on race. So, what they do, they sometimes have kids explore things like white people have more and black people have less, or white people oppress or make life difficult for black people. Especially for kids your age, it is a highly emotional subject. It's very difficult to explore those topics. It is often what they call age inappropriate. You're not really emotionally ready to handle those kind of conversations. That's part of the problem with critical race theory is it is about race. It's a way to kind of make people not like each other based on race, if you
Mm.
understand what I'm saying. Do you follow?
Yeah.
Did I explain it okay for you?
Yeah, that makes sense.
What are some arguments for and against CRT in school? Those that are proponents of having critical race theory in schools, what's their main argument for having that?
Well, a lot of times what they argue is that if you take critical race theory out of school, you're taking out real history,
Hmm.
a true, honest history of racism in America. And I disagree with that. One of my main arguments in my book is that critical race theory and ethnic studies are not the same thing.
Mm.
Ethnic studies is the very positive and healthy learning of one's culture, which leads to self confidence and self understanding and all the things which help people become successful in life. Critical race theory focuses almost exclusively on only our very worst moments without giving due credit to the progress that we've made. When I speak to a lot of critical race theory supporters, I get the impression that they feel the United States is still 1955 Alabama, where
Hmm.
someone like Emmett Till, for flirting with a black woman, had some pretty bad things happen to
Hmm.
him. And we've come a long way since then.
Right.
And they don't seem to want to give any credit for the progress that we've made, the positive things that we've made.
Hmm.
It's a
What?
very difficult subject. It really is. It really is.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty proud of you guys for taking this conversation on, especially at your age. And so far you're doing really great. So keep up the good work. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
So, what are some dangers of the critical race theory teachings in schools?
One of the dangers is there was a woman by the name of Robin Steenman, and her daughter was exposed to critical race theory. And Ms. Steenman, lived in Tennessee, probably still does. But her daughter watched one critical race theory video. It was 13 minutes long, and her daughter was I pre-kindergarten, if I remember
Wow.
correctly.
Oh.
And she always referred to her friends by the boy in the yellow shirt, the
Hmm.
girl in the pink shoes. Never once did she ever call anyone by their race. After watching one 13-minute critical race theory video, her daughter began identifying her friends by race first. That black girl over there, that white boy over there.
Hmm.
And part of the problem, as they went through this thing, the parents, the adults who were going through this reading program began getting depressed. Okay. So if these readings will depress adults, imagine what it will do to children.
Yeah.
And Ms. Steeman went and talked to a doctor about this and psychiatrist and said, hey, what is this negative, negative, negative? The doctor told Miss Steeman that it was the psychology of shame. And a lot of these children were getting depressed.
Hmm.
They were getting suicidal thoughts. They were beginning to hate their families. Um, and these were about things that happened 150 years ago. No one in their family owned a slave. And it is a horrible chapter in our history, and it does need to be taught because you may have heard this before, but if you don't learn history, you are doomed to repeat the worst moments in history.
Right.
So it's a very important subject and we need to teach it. But critical race theory tends to do it in a way that's harmful to children instead of helpful to children.
Yeah. It's interesting because I was going to ask you about the psychology of shame. I saw that reference in your book. And I suppose the way that I've thought a bit about CRT is that it really pins oppressor versus oppressed historically,
Exactly.
even though it's
Exactly.
not today, because you were the oppressor and my heritage was the oppressed. You should feel shame and maybe reparations for what happened back then. And yeah, it's really tricky, as you said, because nobody in our family, at least several generations back, as far as we know, in our ancestry,
Mhm.
owned slaves or anything. People don't really know which side of history that their ancestors were even on. Like, how do you even
Very
get a
true.
good indication of it? There's been some famous people that have gotten their heritage done on television, right? Like for
Right.
example, a Black Lives Matter leader, Sonny Hostin from The View, and they were almost disappointed to find out that they didn't come from an oppressed past, which was
Interesting.
interesting to me. But ultimately, yeah, I think of it like oppressor versus oppressed, and then yes, it gives you this psychology of, oh my gosh, my ancestors were terrible people, and that may or may not be the case. But ultimately, a lot of people came over here, worked hard, built a life, built a family, and it should be taught
Yeah.
in history class. Like, what was it? How did this
Mhm.
happen? How did we
And how do
overcome
we
it?
not repeat it ever again?
Yeah,
And well, at least not in this country, but I have read some things that say actually there are more slaves today than there have been at any other
yeah,
point in history.
yeah. That
So it's slavery is still out there. We happen to be one of the world leaders in fighting against it, in my opinion.
mhm.
But one very interesting thing that came out during the 2020 election, Vice President Kamala Harris was very outspoken and adamant against racism and slavery, expectedly,
Yep.
as she should be. But something came out when they looked at her past, her family were actually slave owners in the Caribbean. As a person of color, she would have never guessed in a million years that her family had been slave owners, but they were.
Yeah.
You just never know.
It's wild.
Yeah.
It's wild.
You mentioned your book. It's called The Critical Race Theory in your school. Why did you decide to write that?
Well, it was a topic that when I was getting my education, it was a topic that was interesting to me. And I saw parents who were struggling with the topic. And one of the things that motivates me is I like to help people. And if I see someone who is struggling with something, I wanted to provide some information to these parents because when you look up critical race theory on the internet, sometimes the messages that you get are very conflicting. And it's kind of hard to know what's real, what's not, what's the truth. And so I wanted to break it all down into one message, one place. And I wanted to help them understand what critical race theory was, but also how to investigate to see if their children were being exposed
Mhm.
to critical race theory in school.
Do kids naturally or instinctively even think about race until they're educated about it?
Not to my best knowledge, no. I have seen a number of very young children, younger than you, who play with children of all races without even giving it a second thought. On my Facebook page, I have several photos of two kids, one an African American, one white. And a lot of times they think they look like twins because they have the same haircut or
Mhm.
they're dressed the same. So they think the teacher can't tell them apart. I think that is the natural state of children, that innocence. And I love that, actually.
I've talked to the boys about this a little bit leading up to our chat today. And boy, as you said, you don't really talk about people's
Yeah, no.
race or background.
I typically like to look for people who do the same things I do. So, like, do the same clubs I do or whatever. Like I play a club called D&D or Dungeons and Dragons. And I just look for
Mhm.
friends who like that or whatever.
Mm-hmm. So you're looking at people who have similar interests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My friend has actually a friend who is black, and we're still friends. We still play together. We play football normally every day at school, and we have a connection. We're both friends, and it doesn't matter if they're black or white. It doesn't really matter.
Good. I think that's a great thing. And I think the thing that should matter most to you is that you both like to play football, the group of you. I think that should be the single most important thing.
Do they teach or do they still teach this stuff in K through 12?
Yes. A lot of critical race theory supporters, they say a couple of different things. Talking points are things you can say over and over and over to kind of convince people of something. So, one of the things they say is that critical race theory is not taught in K through 12 schools. But my book proves without a shadow of a doubt it absolutely is taught
Mm-hmm.
in K through 12 schools. So that's one of their main talking points. Another one is most CRT critics don't even know what CRT is. So what they're saying is, I'm a critic. I don't like CRT. And the only reason I have a problem with it is because I don't understand what it is. But I do understand perfectly what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So, but anyway, that's one of their talking points. Is CRT taught in our schools? Yes, absolutely.
Does it typically come from a state mandate, a curriculum plan that it gets into the schools? Like, are some states more susceptible than others? For example, we live in Arizona, and I don't know what the likelihood of it being here versus California, but I would imagine that those likelihoods are a little bit different.
It happens a couple of different ways. In California, it just became mandated. With the class of 2030, they created something called the California Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum. In this model curriculum, it's now mandatory. In order to graduate, you need to take 3 math classes, 3 English classes, 2 sciences, and now this ethnic studies model curriculum. So in
Okay.
California, yes, and it's actually already being taught in many school systems in our state. Now, out in North Carolina, they had something called the North Carolina Facts Task Force. Parents were complaining about things that were popping up in their children's schools, and it turned out to be critical race theory. So they had 800 entries from parents complaining about things like critical race theory, sexual indoctrination, you name it. Just teachers acting inappropriately in the
Yeah.
classroom.
So this is teachers going above and beyond the curriculum that they're
Yes.
asked to teach.
It's hard to believe that parents go talk to educators, their children's teachers and principals, and they flat out lie to their faces. That's why the very first chapter of my book was titled, Yes, They're Lying to You. There's some parents that were very angry. And quite frankly, I don't think you can blame them. If my kid's teacher lied to me to my face, I would be upset.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope
Do,
most parents
do
would
you
be
think
upset.
I find these scenarios like obviously
Crazy.
like crazy in general. I feel like people are well intended. And so when I think about a teacher lying to a parent about what they're covering in class, is it that they're intentionally saying no, we're not covering that, and knowing that they are covering it, or that they think the material is different? It's a Trojan horse disguised in ethnic studies, but it's
Sure.
actually oppressor versus oppressed curriculum putting shame into certain people because of the color of their skin. Those are very. Is it possible that some of these people just don't see those differences, and so they think that they're telling the truth, but they're actually misleading you?
Well, for sure. I think a lot of people who teach it and feel it's important have probably been indoctrinated. They
Mm-hmm.
see it as the right thing to do. They see it as something that will help or fight against racism in our society. The results say very differently, but there are definitely a select group who are either very, very stupid or are flat out lying to people. And those are the ones that I included in my book. We don't teach critical race theory. Yeah, well, this PowerPoint program that you wrote and presented 1 year ago says you're teaching critical race theory. So, which is it? I try to give the vast majority of teachers the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
Maybe they just think they're doing the right thing, but I did focus on those who were obviously being dishonest.
Yeah.
For examples in this book.
When it comes to critical race theory, what is their goal? What are they trying to achieve with this? What's the outcome that they're looking to get to?
Well, at their heart, and we've kind of talked about this, oppressed versus oppressor, which means they are Marxists at heart. It's a big word. Do you understand what capitalism is, guys?
Yeah.
Do you understand what that is? Where people buy and sell things and make money. Well, a Marxist is someone who believes that anyone who buys and sells things is taking advantage of people. They're cheating people. A capitalist like myself, I believe that a capitalist transaction where one person buys and one person sells something, like right now, your dad is trying to get this podcast going. And for my part, I'm sharing the information that I have in my book with you. And so we both benefit. He's not cheating me. I'm not cheating him. We're both here because it benefits both of us. That's capitalism.
That's a great example.
If you were to talk to a Marxist would say, you know what? One of us is cheating here. I'm doing something unfair. I'm taking advantage of you, or you're taking advantage of me unfairly. And so, what a Marxist will try to do is try to impose fairness, but it's never fair. When my kids used to argue over things, they wanted a toy and they were fighting over it. All right, well, my solution was always, you know what? You need to figure out who's going to do what. And if you can't figure it out, I'm just going to take it away from you and nobody's getting anything.
Right.
That's pretty much Marxism. Nobody gets anything. They want to install a one world socialist communist government to control everything for fairness.
Yeah. For the greater good.
So at their
How is that
heart, I
fair?
think that's their
Wow.
goal. It doesn't make any sense. I'm going to help racism by making these two children of different races angry at each other,
Yeah.
and then somehow have a positive outcome.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Doesn't make
work.
sense.
It
It's
does
like
not make
Can't work.
sense. Very
Can't
well
work.
spoken.
Can't work.
Very good.
it's like fighting racism with more racism. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
that inherently just doesn't sound right. It's like fighting crime with more crime. We wouldn't do that.
That is critical race theory and Marxism.
There is a drive to squash capitalism and the freedoms that we were founded under and appreciate and enjoy for the greater good, meaning there are some people that are suffering or in need, and there are some people that are doing very well. And I would argue that people that are doing very well, in most cases, is because of their effort, their mindset, and their productivity. And people that aren't doing well is because they have the opposite levels of those areas. And of course, there are exceptions, but ultimately, yeah, what Marxism will do is try to even the playing field. And so it really disincentivizes people from being highly productive, highly innovative.
Definitely.
And it's been tried. We know this. I guess, boys, you probably don't know this as well as maybe George and I do, but it's been tried. It's been tried. And it's
Many
directly
times.
related to the deaths of around 100 million people over the last century.
Oh wow.
About. Yeah. Crazy.
A lot.
Absolutely crazy. So, but this time it's really going to work.
Yeah. Just didn't,
You
they
know?
didn't do it right. So this time,
They did it exactly as intended. Here's another phrase, boys, that you may have never heard of, but it's very true. Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
in fact, we watched Star Wars the other night, George, and Emperor
There you go.
Palpatine is a great example
go.
where he wanted to take control of the galaxy
hmm
to bring peace to the galaxy. What did he say, boys?
For
He
the
said,
good of all.
"We will bring peace to the galaxy."
Yes.
And
Scary.
So now you have all this power in the Emperor and maybe Darth Vader's hands, and it didn't turn out to be very peaceful. It turned out to be very oppressive. The United States experiment, which is now quite far along in its experiment, has shown the most productive outcomes in the history of known civilizations, at least,
Yeah.
in terms of what we've been able to accomplish, produce, deliver in society, like uplift poverty levels. All of these things have been better under capitalism than any other government type of system. So,
Agreed. Number of people living in extreme poverty today is at its lowest level in history.
right.
And it's because of capitalism. The United States, the influence of the United States goes far beyond our borders, because we trade with everybody, they trade with each other. And this capitalism benefits everyone around the entire world.
Well, as we were talking about Trojan horses entering into our schools, that is a good segue into the next question.
How can parents or kids recognize critical race theory in their schools?
One of the best ways is to pay attention to homework. When assignments come home, have parents take a look at it. If you see words like privilege, oppression, marginalization, systemic racism, if your children are being forced to explore those ideas, they're being taught critical race theory. And if you don't see any in homework, that's okay. One of the other things you can do is go online and look at the course descriptions for your child's classes online. And a lot of times they'll have those words in there. Don't expect to see the words critical race theory anywhere. They used to put them in there,
Yeah.
but they've started taking them out. When parents started complaining about critical race theory about 4 years ago, they started removing the words
Yeah.
critical race theory out of course descriptions.
And what would they call it
But
otherwise? Ethnic studies? Asked
they
as
call
that?
it ethnic studies a lot of times, even though technically it really isn't ethnic studies. It
Yeah.
really is critical race theory.
Mm.
They also call it social justice. Sometimes you have DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion,
Mm.
although that term tends to be more about the workplace than schools, but
Right.
it's still the same kind of ideas. One of the stories in my book was about a professor who claimed racial conflict costs about $500 billion in productivity in the US workplace.
Yeah.
I have no doubt that conflict between people does cause probably about $500 billion, cost about $500 billion in profits per year.
Mm-hmm.
But if the professor could prove that it was racial primarily, he would have provided the evidence,
Mm-hmm.
but he did not. What is the source of that? Is it because of the color of their skin? And chances are it's behavior. It's not, I don't like him because he's brown or he's yellow or he's whatever. It's about behavior, not race.
Right.
But anyway, but that's a lot of critical race supporters. That's kind of what they try to do, is they try to make it all about race. And in this particular instance, I say I don't agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
If you say that's what it is, you need to prove it. I need to see a study that says that.
Yeah.
And he did
Yeah.
not have a study that said that. So
Yeah. It almost presupposes that the conflict is dependent on race or skin color and not because it
yes,
was actual conflict.
it's
Right.
always race first.
Yeah.
Always.
So, what can parents do to help fix this?
Well, first and foremost, I would go talk to the teacher. Let them know that you are unhappy, you don't approve of this teaching, that you would like to get your children out of this particular lesson plan,
Mm-hmm.
of this course. And if they're resistant, I would try to find other parents who would be willing to support you. Maybe look in your local community for organizations who stand up against things like critical race theory.
Mm-hmm.
There are people out there who can help you. Don't try to do it by yourself. You're the parent, not the school, and
Mm-hmm.
don't let them ever bully you into having your child experience something that you don't approve of.
Okay, good advice. So essentially start at the source and you can escalate from there. I have another question. I've gone to your Facebook page and I've checked out some of your posts and comment sections, and some of them get a little wild. I'm curious, like, what are some of the top objections, complaints, or troll comments that come into your universe? Because that must be
Well,
pretty interesting.
yeah, I would say the top ones are inappropriate for this format.
Okay.
I mean, let's just
Like
say
bad
that
words or
like bad words, they call me names. I mean, you name it. They say some of the worst things I've ever heard anyone say to another human being.
Mm-hmm.
And they call me all kinds of mean things. But you know what? I don't let it bother me because I know in my heart what I'm doing is the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm on the right side when it comes to reducing racism in America.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they are inflaming racism in America.
Mm-hmm.
When you feel like you've got the moral high ground, it's a lot easier to deal with all of the other garbage. Honestly, a lot of times when people say mean things to me, I'll cut and paste them and share them with my other friends, and we
Mm-hmm.
all laugh at them. But the things that they say, I cannot repeat here. Let's
Yeah.
just say that.
oh my.
Wow.
Feel like
So
we've had a few bad people in our comments, but
Yeah.
I mean, like we're actually able to say them probably.
Most of them. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I
like
would hope so
Mhm.
because they're probably adults and your children. You can disagree with a child, but you should do so in an appropriate manner, in a
Yeah.
nice way. So,
Yeah.
We've had some doozies, right, boys? We
Yeah.
look at the comments together because I would rather have the kids be exposed to it and talk through it. I find typically when somebody leaves a comment, I'll ask for an explanation about why they said what they said, and they either don't have one or they'll call me names. And so
yeah.
at
Or
that
they
point, I
won't
feel like
respond.
we've won the argument because we have tried to be respectful and logical. And what I find usually is that when logic fails, insults prevail, is what I say.
Right.
Yes, I agree. And I have to say that what you're doing here, honestly, I wished that I had done something like this with my own children. Podcasts didn't exist when they were younger, but I can't think of a better way to teach your children some of the most valuable lessons in life
Mm-hmm.
than to have them have these discussions. This is a great idea. I wish more parents did it. If more parents did it, I can tell you right now, we probably would not have CRT in our schools. So
Yeah,
kudos to you for doing what you do.
well, thank you. I appreciate that a lot. It means a lot. For all the reasons you mentioned, those are the reasons that we did this. And yeah, I did leave my job last year because I was so concerned about what's happening in society, what's happening in corporate culture, what's happening in
Right.
schools, what my kids are learning, what they should be learning that they're not learning in school, and being part of that. We're really enjoying it. And we get to talk to people like you and many other really interesting people and experts in their own areas. And that's going to be stuff that they soak up and learn. So yeah, we're pretty pumped about it.
Yep.
So without further ado, George, we have a segment in every podcast that we call Rapid Fire.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
All right, I'm
So
ready.
Yeah, you
boys,
just
take it
answer
away.
the questions as quick as you can.
as fast.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
can't explain.
Okay, so what's your favorite pizza topping?
Pepperoni.
All right. If you had a superpower, what would it be?
Flying.
Excluding us, who is your idol?
Jesus Christ.
Good one.
All right. Would you rather die to a great white shark or flaming hot volcano?
Flaming hot volcano. It would be instant.
Mm-hmm.
Coolest invention in your lifetime?
Oh, coolest invention in my lifetime. I would probably say the computer.
All right. Would you rather fight 1,000-pound duck or 1,001-pound ducks?
1,000 1-pound dogs. You can just kick them all over the place, one at a time.
Yeah. Okay. Would you rather be pure vegetarian or pure carnivore for the rest of your
Pure
life?
carnivore. Pure carnivore. I'm a meat eater.
There you go.
Definitely.
Have you ever been stuck in a bathroom stall without toilet paper?
Absolutely.
Yep, probably everyone has.
Yep, it happens. You got to look before you sit down, man. Very important.
Yep.
Well, that concludes rapid fire.
All right.
Okay. Good job.
Woo!
You guys are
Okay,
doing
that was
great.
fun.
You guys are good broadcasters. Nice work.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you,
maybe that'll be my job when I grow up.
Good.
Do you have any final words for our audience and the GSD Nation?
Just make sure that you look around and pay attention. If something doesn't look quite right to you, look it up, do your best to investigate it, but don't just let things wash by. If it doesn't feel right, you need to address it. And there are all kinds of things going on in our society right now where you just can't, that must be normal. It's not normal. If it doesn't feel normal, it's not normal. Say something. Don't just let it blow on by.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for the advice.
That is good advice.
Thank you.
Have the courage to stand up. All right. Well, thanks again, George, for attending and coming on the show and going through a challenging and pretty deep topic with me and the boys. For the audience, if they want to learn more about you, what is the best way to do that, or what resources could we point them to?
Well, you could start by going to my Facebook page,
Okay.
and it's called Critical Race Theory in Your School, How to Fight Back by Dr. George Maurer, same title as my book. I post updates on a nearly daily basis on the latest for critical race theory and DEI subjects.
Okay.
And so if you want to stay on top of the subject, please follow. And if you have any questions, send me a message. I'll be more than happy to engage with you and answer any questions you may have. Please don't be afraid to reach out to me. I want to hear from people like you. And I think that we're in this together. And the most important thing they want us to do is feel alone and powerless, but we're not. We are the majority. There's more of us than them.
I love that. Well, thanks again for coming on the show. I will drop links to your Facebook and your book, everything in the description. This was awesome, and wish you the best of luck. I'm sure we'll stay in touch. If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe, like, comment, share. It really makes a difference for us. Thank you. Until next time.